Here's what nobody tells you about turning 62 in America. The government sends you a letter. It says, congratulations, you're now eligible for Social Security. And 83% of people do exactly what you'd expect. They take the money, they file early, lock in a reduced benefit, and move on with their lives. And most of them have no idea they just made a permanent decision that will cost them tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime. Because here's the thing about Social Security. Once you file, you get a 12-month window to change your mind, 12 months to withdraw your application and pay back every single dollar you received. After that, it's done, locked in. The government doesn't care that you didn't understand the math. They don't care that your brother-in-law told you to file early because the system's going broke anyway. That decision follows you for the rest of your life, and in many cases, follows your spouse after you're gone. The Social Security Administration actually built a break-even calculator on their website to help people figure this out. It was supposed to be a starting point, a tool to get the conversation going. Instead, people plugged in their numbers, saw a result, and treated it like a final answer. The SSA watched this happen and eventually just removed the calculator entirely. Think about that. The government built a tool, watched citizens misuse it, and instead of fixing the tool, they deleted it. That should tell you everything about how poorly this decision is understood. So today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how this works. Not the simplified version. Not the version your financial advisor gives you in a 15-minute meeting. The real version, with the math, the exceptions, the traps, and the handful of situations where filing early is actually the smartest move you can make. I'm going to show you why the standard wait until 70 advice is incomplete, why the file at 62 crowd is mostly wrong, and why the real answer depends on about 7 factors that almost nobody evaluates together. By the end of this video, you'll understand this decision better than most financial advisors explain it to their own clients. Let's start with what's actually happening when you file at 62. Social Security calculates something called your primary insurance amount. That's your benefit based on your highest 35 years of earnings. If you file at your full retirement age, which is 67 for most people born after 1960, you get 100% of that amount. File at 62 and you're accepting roughly 30% less per month. Not for a year, not until you turn 67. Forever. Every single check for the rest of your life is 30% smaller than it would have been. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you delay past 67, Social Security adds 8% per year in what they call delayed retirement credits. That continues until age 70. So let's make this concrete. Say your full retirement age benefit is $3,200 a month. File at 62, you get about $2,240. Wait until 70, you get $3,960. That's a $1,720 per month difference between the earliest and latest filing option. Over 20 years of retirement, we're not talking about pocket change. Over 20 years of retirement. We're talking about a completely different financial life. Let me put it another way. The difference between filing at 62 and filing at 70 is roughly equivalent to whether or not you can afford to keep your house, or whether you're choosing between groceries and medication at 85. These aren't abstract numbers. These are the checks that show up in your bank account every single month for the rest of your life. And here's the compounding part that almost nobody factors in. Every year, Social Security adjusts your benefit for inflation through cost of living adjustments. That adjustment is applied as a percentage of your base benefit. 3% of $3,960 is $119. 3% of $2,240 is $67. That $52 monthly gap in the first year doesn't sound like much. But compound that difference over 15 or 20 years, and the total lifetime gap between filing at 62 versus waiting until 70 can exceed $200,000. Not $20,000, not $50,000. Over $200,000. That's a different retirement. Now, the standard pushback to all of this is the break-even argument. People say, sure, I get less per month, but I'm collecting for more years. And if I die at 78, I come out ahead filing early. Fair point. Let's look at it. In the simplest model, with zero COLA, the crossover point where delaying catches up to early filing falls somewhere around age 80 to 82. So if you die before that, filing early wins on raw dollars collected. But here's the problem with that logic. If you've already made it to 62 without a major health catastrophe, you're not working with the average life expectancy at birth, which is about 79. You're working with the conditional life expectancy for someone who already reached 62, and that number is about 84. You've already survived the childhood diseases, the car accidents, the early cancers. The actuarial tables say you've probably got another 22 years. Shift that life expectancy assumption by just 3 years in either direction, and the entire optimal strategy can flip. If you live to 87 instead of 84, delaying wins by a massive margin. If you die at 81, filing early looks better. And here's a detail most analyses ignore. Women live about 5 years longer than men on average. If you're a woman deciding when to file, the math already tilts toward delaying more than most calculators suggest, because you're statistically likely to collect those larger checks for more years. The problem is obvious. You don't know when you're going to die. Nobody does. And that uncertainty is what makes this decision so difficult. But most people aren't even running the sensitivity analysis. They're picking one number and treating it as gospel. Here's another layer most people completely miss. If you're married, Social Security is not an individual decision. It's a household strategy. Your spouse may qualify for spousal benefits equal to up to 50% of your full retirement age benefit, but they can't access those benefits until you file. So if you're the higher earner and you delay until 70, your spouse sits with nothing from your record during those years. That's a coordination play that changes the math for a lot of families. But the really devastating piece is what happens after you die. When the higher earning spouse passes away, the surviving spouse can switch to a survivor benefit based on the deceased's record. If you filed early and locked in a reduced benefit, that survivor benefit is also permanently reduced. You didn't just cut your own income, you cut your spouse's future income. The person who's going to be living alone, probably with higher per-person expenses, gets a smaller check because of a decision you made years ago. And statistically, that surviving spouse is more likely to be a woman who lives longer on average, meaning she collects that reduced benefit for more years. Now let's talk about taxes, because this is where the planning gets genuinely sophisticated and where most people's eyes glaze over, which is exactly why it costs them so much money. Up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can be subject to federal income tax. The threshold depends on your combined income, which includes half your Social Security plus all other taxable income. If you file at 62 and you're still working part-time, or you have rental income where you're pulling from investment accounts, you could be pushing a large chunk of your benefit into the taxable zone. You might be collecting $2,240 a month, but only keeping $18 after taxes eat into it. But there's a flip side. If you're in a low-income window right now, maybe you've already retired, but your required minimum distributions from traditional retirement accounts haven't kicked in yet. Your Social Security might be taxed very lightly or not at all. After age 73, those required minimum distributions start. Your taxable income jumps, and suddenly, a much larger portion of your Social Security gets dragged into the taxable zone. That's what tax planners call the tax torpedo. Your provisional income crosses a threshold, and the effective marginal tax rate on your next dollar of income spikes to 40, sometimes 50%, because of how Social Security taxation layers on top of regular income tax. Filing early during a low-income gap year can be a legitimate tax management strategy, but doing it without understanding the full picture can cost you more than it saves. So far, I've mostly been making the case for delaying, but there are real, legitimate reasons to file at 62. And I want to go through them because the always wait advice is just as dangerous as the always file early mistake. Reason 1. Your health is genuinely bad. If your father died at 73 and your grandfather died at 71, and you've already had a cardiac event, the break-even math shifts dramatically. Collecting a reduced benefit for 15 years beats collecting nothing while you wait for a larger check you may never see. And this isn't just about terminal diagnoses. If you have diabetes, severe arthritis, CPD, or any chronic condition that's likely to shorten your life or reduce your quality of life significantly, the calculus changes. The system was designed so that you could access it at 62. If your pipe is leaking, you turn on the faucet. Don't let some spreadsheet convince you to wait for money you may never spend. Reason 2. Your spouse has a serious health condition and a higher benefit. This is the most counterintuitive strategy and possibly the most financially powerful. If your spouse is the higher earner and has a terminal or serious diagnosis, file for your own smaller benefit at 62 now. Collect your amount while your spouse is alive. When they pass, switch to their larger survivor benefit. You collect something rather than nothing during the overlap period, then transition to the bigger check. Let me make this real. Say your benefit at 62 is $2,100 a month. Your spouse's full retirement benefit is $3,600. If you wait until 67 to file, and your spouse passes at 69, you collected $0 of your own benefit for 7 years and then switched to their survivor benefit anyway. But if you'd filed at 62, you would have collected roughly $176,000 in your own benefits during those 7 years before making the switch. That's $176,000 that would have sat in the pipe untouched. In some cases, this strategy puts over $100,000 more into the household than either person filing late. Reason 3. The stock market just crashed. This one is genuinely underrated and almost nobody talks about it outside of academic retirement research. If you're retired and drawing down your investment portfolio during a 40 or 50% market decline, you're selling assets at devastating losses just to pay your electric bill. That destroys your portfolio's ability to recover. This is what researchers call sequence of returns risk, and it's the single biggest killer of retirement portfolios. But if you turn on Social Security early, you create a guaranteed income floor. You stop the bleeding in your portfolio. You give your investments time to recover. Filing early during a crash isn't weakness. It's a hedge. And here's the aggressive version of that same idea. If the market collapses and you haven't started drawing down yet, you could file early and use that Social Security income to buy discounted equities. You're buying when everyone else is panic selling, funded by guaranteed government income. That's the kind of move that looks obvious in hindsight, but takes serious conviction in the moment. Picture it. Financial advisor on the phone telling you not to make emotional decisions. Meanwhile, you're filing for Social Security and buying index funds at 60 cents on the dollar. Reason 4. You want to enjoy retirement while you can actually enjoy it. This gets dismissed as emotional reasoning, but it's not. There's solid evidence that spending in retirement follows a predictable curve. High in the early active years, lower in the middle years, and very low in the final years. The money you have at 63 is fundamentally different from the money you have at 83. Not because the dollar amounts are different, but because your ability to use it is different. I've heard too many stories about people who delayed everything, retired at 72 with more money than they ever imagined, and spent the first 2 years of retirement going to medical appointments. By the time they had freedom, they couldn't do half the things they'd planned. That's not a math problem. That's a timing problem. Reason 5. You simply need the money. And I'm going to say this without any condescension because this is more common than people want to admit. Medical bills happen. Businesses fail. Pensions disappear. Families need support. Maybe your company downsized at 61 and nobody's hiring someone your age. Maybe your savings took a hit you didn't expect. Maybe you're helping a child or a grandchild through a financial crisis. Social Security exists as a safety net. If you need it at 62, using it is not a failure. It's the entire point of the system. Every dollar you contributed over your working life was building toward this moment. There's no prize for leaving money in the pipe when you can't pay your bills. Now, before you make this decision, there's one more thing you should know. The financial planning industry has a structural incentive to tell you to delay. Advisors who manage your investment portfolio earn fees based on assets under management. If you delay Social Security and spend from your portfolio, their fee base shrinks faster. If you file early and draw Social Security income instead, you preserve more of your portfolio, which means higher advisory fees for longer. I'm not calling anyone corrupt. I'm saying there's an incentive, and you should know it exists before you take advice at face value. The same advisor who says delay until 70 is also the person whose income depends on you spending your portfolio instead of using government income. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It means you should understand the game before you listen to the coaching. So what's the actual answer? File early or delay? That's the wrong question. The right question is which of these conditions apply to your life right now? Because this is not a generic optimization problem. It's a personal decision with dozens of variables, and the answer changes depending on your health, your spouse's health, your savings, your tax situation, your portfolio, and the current state of the market. 3 things to do before you decide. First, run the break-even analysis, but don't just use one life expectancy. Change it by plus and minus 3 years, then 6 years, and watch what happens. If the optimal strategy flips completely with a small change, your margin for error is thin, and you need more information before you commit. Second, if you're married, model this as a household decision. Include spousal benefits and survivor benefits. Your filing decision directly affects your partner's financial future. Third, look at your tax situation honestly. Are you in a low-income window right now that's going to disappear when required minimum distributions begin? If so, the timing of your filing has tax implications most people never consider. The Social Security Administration deleted their break-even calculator because people were treating a starting point as a final answer. Don't make that same mistake with your retirement. This decision is permanent. It affects every month of the rest of your life, and in many cases, it affects every month of your spouse's life after you're gone. Take the time to get it right. Because the difference between the right call and the wrong call isn't a few dollars. It's $200,000 and the difference between a retirement you enjoy and one you just survive.